Learning Cluster. Thank you so much for joining. We have probably a few more people that will be joining in the next minute or so, but we had to get set up here, and we're going to be going over a few housekeeping items to get us ready for this webinar. My name is Luis Chavez. I'm with the Career Ladders Project. Welcome everyone again. This will be a 1 hour and a half webinar. It is being recorded. The video slides will be shared, as well as other email materials that will be sent out after the webinar. We'd like for everyone to know who's on the webinar with us. So we're going to be using the chat room for this purpose. So if you would please share your name, your college, the number of people that are joining you, and if you would, if any of you are engaged with or involved with an LFM project, could you just put LFM on there, just so that we know that someone on your team, or maybe your team listening, is part of the LFM group, and that'll be useful information for us to have. Thank you for doing that. We are using Zoom technology, so everyone should automatically be muted. We'd like for all of us to be muted, or not all of us, but most of us to be muted, so that we can just make sure that we don't get any interference with our webinar as we proceed. So you can also disable your video if you would like. For technology guidance and support, the person that's helping us out here at the Career Ladders Project, where we're located, is Christina Sandoval, and you could use chat to contact her if you have any issues or concerns. We're also getting support from Josh from Zoom. So thank you, Josh, for that. Our pathway today is focused on embedding data literacy in GP design with equity in mind. And so we will be also doing Q&A. So we'd like for you to use the chat box for that purpose. So as you are listening and hearing or having questions come to mind, please list them on the chat or save them to put into chat later. And you could also have a chat directly with Christina as well. And we will be doing a Q&A at the end with Dr. Lara-Brady and myself. So it'll be Laura and Luis at the end with Q&A with you as we wrap up. And I'm going to be turning it over to Dr. Lara-Brady that will share with us background information for today's session.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Luis. This is our third learning cluster, and I'm very, very excited that we've come this far. But just a little bit about my background for those of you that are not familiar with my work. I've been doing research specifically in higher education for the last 13 years. And my role in the region is to provide all colleges with the support they need to be successful as they move forward implementing guided pathways. So make sure to contact me whenever you have any questions about support. Again, anything that comes through any of the regional coordinators is free of charge. So more incentives. But moving into the vision for success and providing you a little background for this. Vision for success is a set of expectations for the system that is paired with focused support, with the goal of increasing student completion. And we see guided pathway as a vehicle for moving vision for success. The guided pathway framework creates a highly structured approach to student success that provides all students with a set of clear course-taking patterns that promotes better enrollment decisions and prepares students for future success. The guided pathway framework also integrates support services in ways that make it easier for students to get the help they need during every step of the community college experience. Now, to better understand the needs of the region, I dove into the materials that colleges submitted to the Chancellor's Office. That was the self-assessment on the work plans. And also how to understand how these plans looked on the ground, I visited all of the campuses to meet with college presidents and the Guided Pathways team. And this was May, June, early this year. My conversation at each college focused on how colleges were implementing guided pathways, but more specifically, try to understand barriers and challenges that were surfacing as this work was moving forward. I had open and candid conversations with GP teams and leaders at each college, and I thank you all for that. And from this, a collaborative plan of support emerged from both, again, discussions and the material they reviews. The goal was to provide personalized support for the region, in this case specifically the Central Valley region. And so here's the collaborative support system that came up for the Central Valley. We have workshops about once a semester, sometimes twice per semester. They're large. They don't provide the ability to drill down on a specific topic too much. So that's one option. The second option that we have is targeted in-person support. For example, we've done some flex-day support and meta-major sorting activities and GP 101 and GP inquiries for a number of colleges there. But the truth is that this is not a sustainable model, and it's at all times across, we can't have support at all times across the region or state, and it's very time and labor intensive. And so the learning cluster became a way to bridge that gap. We were trying to keep conversations going on a monthly basis. We decided to deliver this content via webinar and record it so that everyone from any location could attend and watch. And this was specifically prevalent for small rural colleges that don't have the capacity to send personnel or to afford travel time. We got you. Now, we also have the Vision Research Center now. It's launched, it's public, it's anyone across the state can join in, and we'll do a sneak peek at the end, but that's where we want to house all the tools, and we hope that it will be a two-way conversation where we could upload tools as well as you could upload and download tools and tell us what's working, how are you using some of these supports. But coming back to the Learning Cluster was a space that is co-designed with Central Valley College teams to share the experiences and learnings. We're hoping to use these as vehicles to create a space for questions and exchange effective practices across the region. Central Valley Learning Cluster presenters and participants can be both from across colleges, including instructional, counseling, and student support services and staff. We first started the very first Learning Cluster talking about all the foundation pieces that need to be set in order to implement meta majors, and then we talked about student support services, and now we're talking about data coaching, data mentoring. So I'm very excited to continue these conversations. To support these, the Chancellor's Office is working alongside a group of partners, CLP, the Academic Senate, RP and Elephant Group, 3CSN, and in the region, CVHEC. By providing these different levels of support, we hope to encourage peer-to-peer learning, inform and encourage change processes, leverage regional partnership and resources, and showcase effective practices within the region. Now, I want to introduce you a couple folks from CLP that have been key. We have, well, Collaborative, they represent a wealth of knowledge in the community college system, 4-year K-12 and nonprofit, and are directly involved in supporting the Chancellor's Office and GP implementation. We have Luis Chavez, who's Senior Director of the Career Ladders Project, and we also have Cristina Sandoval, Program Coordinator, Career Ladders Project. We have been working with them to support the rolling out of learning clusters, and they have been phenomenal. Although we do miss Catherine Bergman, too. Shout out.
Yes.
But I also want to quickly introduce Kelly Kareneff from RP Group. She's a senior researcher. She really focuses on qualitative research. And she's part of the team that looks into how colleges have built data literacy across their campuses statewide. And she's here to share some findings and highlights, specifically from the work from Santa Monica College. So with that, I'll leave you, Kelly.
Thank you, Lara. So good morning, everyone. Looking forward to talking to you today about building data literacy, specifically through data coaching to support guided pathways, inquiry, and design on your campuses. So we're hoping that today you walk away with some ideas about key ingredients and considerations for effective data coaching models, and data coaching being one strategy for building data literacy on your campuses. We're going to provide some concrete examples from Bakersfield and Santa Monica, really doing a deep dive of Santa Monica for jumpstarting a data coaching effort on your campus. And then we're going to direct you to some resources that can help advance some of your own local planning. So this past summer, the Research and Planning Group conducted some exploratory research on data coaching models, and this was really designed to give us a foundational understanding of what's out there in terms of data coaching models specific to advancing guided pathways planning and implementation. And the big headline here is that we heard you. We heard you through your self-assessments and your work plans, and throughout last year's workshops and in our ground level work with colleges that, you know, campuses know they need to be using data to inform decision making and get that data use is integral to virtually all parts of guided pathways development, and yet many colleges don't have an established culture of inquiry or a regular practice for using data across all parts and levels of the college, and are really seeking help to build this capacity. So the RP group conducted some basic research to better understand the landscape for building data literacy through this particular strategy of data coaching, both to inform our own work to support the field and then to also inform the work of our partners in the Chancellor's office. So we took the summer months to conduct a survey of what's known about data coaching, particularly in the context of guided pathways, and then to take a look at a few models. And we did this through a literature review, as well as through interviews with 10 people, including institutional researchers, data coaches, and data coach program leads at 3 colleges, Bakersfield, Santa Rosa Junior College, and Santa Monica College. So let's just lay a foundational definition here about what we mean when we talk about data coaching. And when we talk about data coaching, we mean just basically providing direct support to key college personnel to build their capacity to access and use data in inclusive decision making. So this is, again, one strategy for helping people across your college access data and use it in decision making in a continuous way. And it could be institutional researchers coaching people across the college. It could be a dedicated cadre of faculty or staff who are trained to support their colleagues, or it could be support coming in from an outside partner. And coaching can happen at all levels. It could happen at the classroom level, the program level, the functional level, or the institutional level. And in our case, we really focused on coaching designed to build data literacy to help make informed decisions that can lead to improved student success, and with a focus on equity and to advance institutional effectiveness. And in this context of guided pathways development, we really care a lot about inclusive decision making and bringing people to the table to be able to discuss what the data are saying and make decisions based on what they're seeing in the data. So when we surveyed the literature and we looked at existing practice, we found that data coaching in the context of guided pathways is really an emergent area. There's not much known about data coaching for guided pathways. And at the same time, we know that to effectively engage in guided pathways inquiry and design and implementation, we're really going to need to be able to build the capacity of people across our campuses to use data to engage in inclusive decision making at all stages and across all elements of guided pathways development. So what did we find? I'm going to do a quick overview of some key ingredients and considerations that emerged from this research. And the first one is that you really need to articulate a clear purpose for your data coaching effort, kind of a basic idea, but a critical one. And so, you know, it's really important to start by answering the question, why are we doing this? Why are we launching an effort to build data literacy across the campus, and why specifically through data coaching? And the literature suggests that first and foremost, it should be about improving the institution. And by extension, data coaching should have a direct link to a college's goals for closing student equity gaps. And if we want everyone to be empowered to be involved in this process, and if inclusive decision-making is important, then everyone across the campus should have access to data and competency with using it as they make decisions. So it's really about empowering everyone across the campus to be a part of this process. In our systems context, data-driven decision-making is critical to all aspects of guided pathways inquiry, design, and implementation. And whether it be identifying which student groups are not making it through our institutions to completion, or looking at student experience to understand the factors that support or hinder their progress at different junctures, or understanding labor market demand and transfer data so we can make backward design of our meta majors. It's really fundamental to all aspects of guided pathways development. So when we talk to colleges, we know that sometimes data coaching realistically starts in a more organic way, or it might initially focus on one function or one component of the college, like say, data coaching in the context of CTE, for example. But the ultimate hope is that data coaching is viewed as a critical strategy for institutional reform and equity efforts across the broader institution. So the next key ingredient that emerged from the research was that it's really important to engage data coaches who can lead a collaborative inquiry process. We learned that thoughtful recruitment of data coaches themselves is really important to data access and use across the campus, and that engaging coaches who can lead collaborative inquiry is really key. Ideally, these coaches would have multiple capabilities. First, they should be data interested. They don't have to be data geeks, but they have to want to know about the data. They have to want to learn how to access it and use it effectively. And most importantly, they have to be able to look at ways to communicate the meaning behind data, tell a story about what the data is revealing about students or the institution. And data coaching is really fundamentally about relationship development and building trust and being thoughtful and empathetic and respectful of others' departure points and levels of comfort with the data. We learned a lot about this when we talked to the different colleges that are engaged in data coaching, that this can be really a sensitive type of relationship that, particularly when looking at equity data, data that may reveal opportunity gaps, it can feel very personal for practitioners to see that the students that they really care about and are so dedicated to may not be succeeding in the ways that they personally thought they might have been. So having that sensitivity is really vital, and being good listeners to understand what those who are being coached are struggling with or are hoping to improve upon. And ultimately, data coaches really need to believe in the power of data to help support change in their own practice or their own program or function or across the college, and be willing to kind of walk the talk, show how they're using data and inquiry in their own practice to improve their service to students. We also learned from colleges that it's really important to provide upfront training and ongoing support throughout the data coaching process. So data coaches themselves have some foundational skills and some ongoing resources to access as they are doing the data coaching work. They have access to the IR office. They might have a peer group that they can go to do troubleshooting or share resources that they're developing to support their data coaching work, and have ongoing training as they come to different experiences in their data coaching work. Next ingredients is really about treating data coaching as an ongoing and iterative process. And again, this is kind of the ideal set of circumstances we learned from the literature, and when we talk to colleges, that we know that it can be challenging to practically achieve all the steps that I'm about to go over, or that they don't always occur in a linear fashion. Things may be a bit more organic, but think about these steps as kind of providing a framework for thinking about how you might carry out a data coaching process. And we'll hear about this more from Santa Monica. So ideally, you want your data coach to be building an inclusive data team. So bringing the right people to the table to determine what questions they're trying to address and what specific issues need exploration or to be better understood through data. And then helping that team determine what data can answer that particular inquiry question and where to access data. And this is really an excellent opportunity to raise awareness across your campus of the public resources that exist, like Datamara at the Launch Board or Salary Surfer, and educate them on how to access data on their own and make sense of it. And after accessing and data collecting we want the data coach then to be working with the team to make sense of what they find in the data and figure out what they want to do with this evidence and information and how they want to share those findings and decisions more broadly, particularly in terms of guided pathways design. And then from there, the process isn't over, but ideally it would generate new questions or lead the team to think about what new data they might need next to continue their work. We really want to treat data coaching as an ongoing process. It's not a one and done activity. It happens in an iterative way. So as I mentioned, we talked to 3 different colleges, Santa Rosa Junior College, Bakersfield College in your own backyard, and Santa Monica College. So Bakersfield has a broad-scale data coaching infrastructure in place that was really born out of the fact that they were seeking to have some local data and research capacity on their campus. Historically, it was all housed at the district level. That's since evolved, and they now have institutional effectiveness staff on their campus leading their work. But this came from a local need. So an effort to solve the problems that they were struggling with locally in terms of moving from just accessing data kind of in a Band-Aid approach way to creating a more systematic approach for getting data into the hands of practitioners so that they could make sense of it and use it for action. So Bakersfield College is down the road a bit in terms of their guided pathways development and have been able to really embed their data coaching into their guided pathways work in a pretty advanced way by creating completion teams that provide wraparound services to students in different pathways, both pathways that are academic program specific and then to cohorts of student-specific student groups that they call affinity groups. So all data coaches individually have an affinity for data and come from instructional faculty or counseling faculty or the administrative and classified ranks. So they're really pulling data courses from across the college. And the IR office is now providing training to coaches on a regular basis on topics ranging from how to access data to requesting data to creating pivot tables. And Bakersfield really is a great example of how to use a kind of a data and action model where specific data and information are being provided to teams, and then those individuals are acting on data to contact students and refine their practice. We're going to talk now with our friends at Santa Monica College, which launched a broad data literacy effort in 2017, primarily engaging faculty in serving as data coaches to help their colleagues identify equity challenges and plan for programmatic improvements. And now they're entering their 2nd year of implementing this approach. And we're so fortunate to have Hannah Lawler, Edna Chabari, and Laura Manson here today to tell us more about their experience and work. Hannah is the Dean of Institutional Research, as well as the co-chair for the Data Coach Planning Committee, and has the primary responsibility for the content of the program and provides some hands-on training to data coaches. And she's going to talk with us about the purpose behind Santa Monica's data coaching program. We also have Laura Manson, who's the faculty lead and a data coach herself, and she's going to talk with us about recruiting and supporting data coaches. And last, we have Edna Chabari, who is the Director of Academic Affairs Initiatives and has also part of the Data Coaching Planning Committee. She helps with the professional development for the program with a focus on equity theory, logistics. She does recruitment and does it all. And she's going to talk to us about the data coaching program, the data coaching program process. So we welcome them and we thank them for being with us today. So Hannah, I'm going to start with you to begin by talking about your work to articulate a purpose for your data literacy work. So what got your college started building data literacy, and kind of specifically, what were the motivations for building a data coaching program on your campus?
Sure. So as the Dean of Institutional Research, I was familiar with the concept of data coaching. You know, it's often done in the K-12 as well as in the corporate kind of landscape. And, you know, we're a very big college here at Santa Monica. We have an annual student headcount of 45,000 students. And we have a very small office for the size of our college. And so, you know, leading the institutional research area for the college and understanding like the limited resources that we had and the budget landscape not changing, I had been thinking of ways to kind of expand the capacity of the college to gather and analyze data without necessarily hiring more staff. And so the idea of bringing data coaching to the campus had been kind of percolating in my mind for a while, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I had kind of started taking steps. At the time, Bakersfield was the only community college in California that had implemented data coaching, so I spoke with their vice president of academic affairs there about their program. And I happened to have shared the idea with our Dean of Workforce and Economic Development. About the same time, the state, when we started implementing Strong Workforce and the Launch For tool was launched, the Dean of Workforce came to me and said, remember that idea you had about data coaching? I found some funding through the CTE Data Unlocked initiative. So we decided to bring data coaching and fund it through CTE Data Unlocked. And for us, it was an ideal place for us to start the data coaching program because we wanted, the faculty in CTE had to engage in data collection and analysis more often than some of our other faculty because they did the more frequent program reviews, they did Perkins applications, and obviously now with Strong Workforce, they had to do some reporting for their programs. So that's kind of how we started a year and some change ago.
That's great. So how would you say, if at all, your data coaching effort connects to a broader institutional agenda at this point?
So the primary purpose of our data coaching program is to build the research capacity of the college. Helping our college compile and analyze data in the context of programs. And so the mission of our office in institutional research is to kind of, you know, support and promote a culture of inquiry. So in that way, the data coaching program was meant to support that kind of mission. Our data coaching efforts, really, it's not about teaching faculty to be institutional research. We don't really introduce stats or research methods. We simply connect faculty to existing data resources and provide them hands-on practice. So for us, the data coaching program, we really aim to get them to teach faculty on how to think more critically about data and drive more thoughtful and intentional discussions around program data and kind of how to think about data. And this idea about, you know, the institutional agenda to promote a culture of inquiry and continuous improvement. We really wanted to equip the faculty with the skills necessary to ask really salient and relevant questions that would lead to better decisions and planning for our programs. And also, we wanted to build agency in the faculty that they too can look at data. It's not just the role of an institutional researcher. So yeah.
Great. And when you were developing this, I hear that you were working with the workforce development dean. Who else kind of took the lead in developing the approach with the institutional research office?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate here, even though institutional research kind of initiated the idea of data coaching, The coaching program really is a true collaborative effort with not just the workforce and economic development area. They are funding the program currently. We plan to further fund it through SEEP moving forward, but we were fortunate to have the support of the Center for Teaching Excellence, which is the Professional Development Center for Faculty. Edna Shafari, who you're going to hear from, she's the director responsible for the center. So it is, a true collaboration and partnership between IR, workforce, the Center for Teaching Excellence, and we also have a faculty leader who you'll hear from, Laura Manson, who provides kind of the faculty input and leadership in making sure that the program is meeting kind of the campus needs in terms of the faculty point of view.
It sounds like you've been able to really leverage across different functions of the college to bring good thinking and resources to bear, and it makes me think a lot about the kind of the context for guided pathways development, where we're really trying to encourage cross-functional inquiry and work, bringing collaborative teams together. So it's really helpful to know. So tell us a little bit about how equity fits into your model and approach. How does your data coaching work support your institution's equity agenda?
So equity for us, particularly in research, it's kind of baked into all of our processes. So it was actually very effortless to kind of center equity in the data coaching. So from day one, our data coaches have to participate in 2 full days of an institute. And from that first day, we introduce kind of the concept of what it means to achieve equity. We introduce like the kind of the mechanics of like how is equity calculated in the different ways, and then how to ask equity-minded questions about the data. So we spend a lot of, the equity is a very large challenge to tackle, and we're not expecting data coaches to kind of solve equity issues on campus on their own, but we just wanted data coaches to be aware of the power of the data, to show inequity in our programs, to help them help our folks in our different departments to kind of move the needle and support the discussions about what we need to do to close the equity gaps. And Enno will talk a little bit more about that, but we also provide optional hands-on training where data coaches, we practice, like what are the types of questions that will come up when you are presenting data to a department. Like what are the deficit-minded kinds of comments that might arise, and how can you as a data coach kind of pivot and reshape the conversation and discussions to be more equity-minded. So we learn about what the difference between deficit-minded and equity-minded frameworks are, and we also practice in engaging in like conversation about like, okay, what if someone like someone in a department blames the student for their inequities? Like, how would you shape that conversation, and how would you kind of respond to that? So there's opportunity for data coaches to get in-depth training on how to do that. So we spend a lot of time around how to frame data in the equity framework.
That's really helpful. Now, I know that you started your work initially in partnership with the Workforce Development Division, and kind of sprung out of the need for CTE faculty to be looking at data on a regular basis in their work. Now, I understand that over the past year, you've kind of been able to evolve the data coaching work to focus a bit more on your guided pathways inquiry and design work. Can you tell us a little bit about that evolution?
Sure. So like you said, initially our data coaching work was not directly connected to our guided pathways work because the data coaching program preceded our guided pathways efforts. Santa Monica College is one of the AACC 2.0 pathways colleges. So we really started digging into our pathways work last year, which was the first year of the data coaching. So as we weren't able to respond in time for the first cohort of our data coaches, but for this year's cohort, we really focused on training the data coaches on the kind of the data conversations that would occur in guided pathways types of work groups. For example, you know, we're framing a lot of the training around like program mapping. So like for our students, how can inform program mapping, our scheduling of courses, how we sequence our courses for our programs, you know, how do we communicate occupations and expected wage, you know, to the students as we're creating program maps. So yeah, so this year we're, you know, focused on connecting resources to, related to our actual work that we're doing for pathways. So this year, our pathways work is focused on program mapping. So and kind of career advising and connecting to careers. So we're focused on, you know, helping them understand how to access labor market information, as well as getting information about their students and their success to create these program maps and schedules and sequence of courses.
That's great. That's very helpful. All right. Thank you, Hannah. We're going to now shift to talking a bit more about the data coaches themselves at Santa Monica. And Laura is going to help us with that. So, Laura, just want to start with talking about recruiting and supporting data coaches who can lead collaborative inquiry. And how do you support your data coaches at Santa Monica? What training do they receive, and where do they go for help?
Okay. Our data coaches have access to me as a faculty lead. They also have access to the institutional research department division. They also have access to resources that are housed in our Canvas team's home, videos, worksheets, things along that line. They have access to each other. They also take time to meet with each other to support and inquire amongst themselves about different support things. The training is about 9 hours of hands-on application with additional trainings that they could go if they wanted to dive deeper into one of the tools. So some of the tools they were trained on is Data Mart, Launchboard, Tableau, Salary Surfer, how to pull Perkin core indicators, the labor market information. We also played with Top, Sock, and zip codes. That was a lot of fun. And then we also had questions. We also had dialogues, and kind of an ongoing piece was questions to guide data conversations or discussions with our clients. Again, because sometimes we may have some tender topics that come up, so how do we graciously honor what they're doing and kind of refocus them to get them to what they really are trying to get to.
Can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of the training? So if I recall, the institute happens right before the first semester, is that right? Over 2 days?
We did it over a day and a half. And it was before school started.
And then I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the Canvas shell that you built out to support the data coaches over the course of the year. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Yeah,
so we divided it up into resources that they would have go to once they became data coaches or after the training. And also what was on there was the materials that they had access to. Everybody was given a notebook. But in case you misplaced your notebook, all the information was also housed in Canvas, so they could always go back and say, oh, I remember we talked about Launchboard and we did this little worksheet. Let me go back and look at that, because that may help me now that I'm going to go talk to health sciences, because they're wanting to recruit. They want to offer maybe day classes, and they've not been offering evening classes. So that information is there available for them at any time. That's what's nice about Canvas.
Yeah. One of the other things I remember in speaking to one of the data coaches on your data coaching team was scenario-based training that you did during the institutes and how useful it was to be able to really dive in deep with specific scenarios, how to work through those scenarios that they might encounter. Can you tell us a little bit about that aspect of the institute?
Certainly. So what we did was come up with different case studies. One was, here's the first time this department chair, or the department, because sometimes the department chair could appoint someone else to take the lead on program review. But this is the first time dealing with program review. So what are the questions? What are the options to finding that data? What things can we go to? Can we go to Tableau? Can we go to Launchboard? Can we go to Datamart? So what are some things? So we gave them case studies, and this is where the hands-on came in, where they actually were working through that program. So we tried to do it where it wasn't their department. We gave different departments so they could begin to see, how do you do this inquiry? How do I research this information? We also did another case study about new programming, because again, our focus on our first training was more CTE, and with CTE, you always have to figure out, is there a need? What's the income, et cetera? So we did case studies on how would you find out if being a surveyor is a viable thing that we could bring to our college?
That's great. It's very helpful. So I'm going to ask you some nuts and bolts questions about the engagement of data coaches. How do you incentivize participation? Do you pay your data coaches?
Yeah, they receive a stipend, and the stipend includes them attending the training plus 2 to 3 different activities they need to do. One would be a department meeting. One could be a group process. So we had it all spelled out in the contract that if you did X, Y, and Z, then you receive this stipend. Which was nice, though. We also had an additional option if somebody wanted to make handouts, because they've gone through this experience. They go, oh, you know what, this handout would be really helpful for department chairs about doing program review. So they could do that. They could make a video. And also, again, that was also attached to a stipend once they completed those tasks.
That's great. So some standard stipend for everybody, and then if they went above and beyond to create some additional resources, they could access additional stipend.
Correct.
Great. Can you say how much time it takes to do this data coaching work? I mean, if you were going to estimate how much time a data coach invests over the course of the year in data coaching, can you estimate that?
Estimate the time for the data coaches?
Yeah, if I were, say, getting ready to sign up to be a data coach, and I asked about the time commitment, what would you say it roughly takes to serve as a data coach?
Well, I would think, again, the first 9 hours of hands-on training, I would tell them probably look to do, maybe you're going to want to, most of them want to get more information, so I would say add another 3 hours to go and dive deeper into one of the tools, and then to maybe do the other one, so maybe 20 hours.
A year.
A year.
Okay, that's great. Now, I'm going to back up a bit and ask you about recruitment. What's your recruitment process like? Is it come one, come all? Anybody who wants to be a data coach can, or do you have a selection process?
We've done it a couple of ways, and you'll pipe in and help me if I can remember. Again,
sorry, I'm asking off script here a bit.
So the first round was CTE, and we went to the chairs and asked for recommendations to say who in your division or your department you think would be a nice liaison for this data information.
And when we did that, we actually had parameters for the department chairs to speak about, and we also sent the department chairs an email that they can just forward to the people that they thought would be good fits. So we did say, sort of similar to the slide that you showed a little while ago, we wanted somebody who, well, number one, they're going to be here, right, in the next year to be able to work with the departments. We were looking for somebody who had very high levels of computer skills, somebody who's comfortable talking to others who they don't necessarily know and be able to facilitate these questions in a sort of kind manner without judgment of what the person knows and doesn't know.
So you're getting into a little bit of, what's your ideal data coach? Can you tell us a little bit more about what this person does well or what this person is like?
Yeah, so we were looking for people who are curious, who want to problem solve, because it's, when you look at data, it is a puzzle. You're trying to figure out something. You're asking a question. When should we offer classes? So you have to go and find out who are your students. What time are they taking classes to better figure that out. Someone who is a listener, we thought that was very important. Again, someone who understands data and doesn't mind poking around and finding it out. And also somebody who understands that this data is just truly a snapshot of time, in time. That it's not like doom and gloom, or this is your perfect, you don't need to do anymore ever again, or this is horrible. It's just a snapshot that we maybe figure out why that's going on. That's where the narrative comes in. So somebody, again, who also can help facilitate the seeker of the data, that department, that division, to help still tell their story, to give the narrative.
Great. So I think we're starting to get a little bit into the actual data coaching process. So I'm going to shift to you, Edna, to talk to us a little bit about what your data coaches do. So who do they work with, and how often are they working with those individuals or teams? Can you give us say a scenario or an example?
Sure. So I would actually invite everybody to just Google SMC data coaches so that you could see the way that we laid out the website for folks. The idea is that currently, because of our funding system, we're focusing on CTE, although we're expanding to the larger campus. That's kind of what we're gearing up for. So our idea would be that a faculty member, a department chair would reach out and say that they had a question, say around how to fill out for a local grant or for program review, and they would ask their question. They would give information as far as, because we have satellite campuses, where and when they would want to meet, and they can even select a coach that they want to meet with. And that way the coach, we know that the coach has been requested, and we're able to, the coach also finds out if they're available at that given time. There are, though, some people who are reaching out directly to data coaches because they know them in their departments, or they may have heard somewhere else that this person is a data coach. So we do know that people are also reaching out directly to the coaches themselves.
Great. So can you just tell us about some of your biggest wins or your successes so far with the program?
Sure. So I think the success is that people are beginning to know data coaches and trusting the data coaches themselves in the process, right? So in the last few years, Hannah and her team have really made data accessible, and it's a question now of people wanting data. But how do you move data out of just institutional research into the hands of folks? So now I think with data coaches, it's becoming a lot more, it's becoming a lot easier for them to answer their own questions and to seek to answer their own questions before they go to IR. That's where we're going, at least, and I think that's a big win. From our first cohort, we have 2 wins. The first is that one of the data coaches actually used training to lead equity discussions within their department based around equity, which was really wonderful. And the second is that one of the original data coaches has now, for lack of a better term, sort of become the head coach to the second cohort. And so this person is now able to guide the data coaches, able to give personal experiences as a data coach to younger, newer data coaches. So that's sort of helpful because you then develop this community amongst the data coaches that is actually very strong now with the second cohort. So the second cohort are developing partnerships within themselves and going to themselves with questions, which is a huge win for us because what you want obviously is as much independence as possible. And they've also developed we've also developed ongoing opportunities for training beyond the mandatory 2 days for data coaches, and these are being well received. They're on Fridays, so we're trying to make it as open for the faculty, and they are participating, which is pretty big for us.
So it's really exciting to be able to see both kind of an evolution within the data coaches where they're starting to develop their own capacity and expand that capacity, and at the institutional level that you have people asking for data or seeking data out to help them with their decision making and planning. So can you give us maybe a concrete example? You mentioned about one data coach using the training to do some equity work with his department. Can you talk to us about how you've been able to work concretely to help close, or well, not close, but begin to address equity gaps through data coaching? And I'm going to also ask you to speak a little bit closer to the microphone if possible.
Okay, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, great.
Great. So, one of the things to understand, I think, from the benefit of this program is that a lot of the data coaches have actually already received equity training. So that's helpful, right? They've done the Teaching Men of Color. They've had, we do an equity summit every winter. We have a faculty summer institute. So many of the faculty that we're recruiting for the program already have a background knowledge to it. That doesn't mean that they are equity coaches, but it means that they at least have some of the vernacular. And they can understand part of the equity discussions. So with that, I will say that any data coach that is going to talk about equity needs to be prepared for the inevitable, which is that when you see equity gaps, people will try to explain away the equity gap. Say that, oh, well, it's for no fault of the institution, but Black students don't want to come into this program, or we're losing veterans, so of course they don't want to go into this field. The data coach then has to take that as a seizable teaching moment, and as any instructor knows, you have to address that issue before you can really move on to the next learning topic. So with that, it's a question of, do you really believe that this is true, and why? What research have you done to see that veterans have actually decreased in size, or have you actually marketed towards Black students for your program? What are the reasons? And so it really becomes about inquiry into data from an equity standpoint, rather than just letting that moment stay in the air. That's really difficult. And so part of our trainings have been around equity and facilitating those questions. And even in real time with our data coaches, talking about why that may be deficit-minded rather than equity-minded.
Can I add something that's going on right now that came out of data coaching that's kind of the most concrete example of how the data coaching program's been trying to address the equity gaps is, for us at Santa Monica, we often have had college level discussions around equity data, but that didn't necessarily motivate individual faculty to act upon the data. And I think what data coaching has done is to bring the equity data into the departments themselves. And so you spoke with, the RP group spoke with one of our data coaches from last year, who's an adjunct faculty member in the communications department. And he, Edna mentioned, he brought in course success and retention data disaggregated by ethnicity and race for every single faculty member, and provided that to each of the faculty members. And I think, without that happening, we wouldn't be where we are right now with that department, because, as a result of that work, several of the full-time faculty in that department reached out to IR and said, can you help us do something about this data? We're not satisfied that, you know, these equity gaps exist for our African American Latino students. And so right now we're working with them to do a review of the literature on strategies that seem to help students of color. And they are actually looking to design an experiment starting next fall to test out some of these strategies to see if they are actually going to close the equity gap. And what's great about the discussions we've been having with the faculty is that usually the discussions are about like all students. How can we get all students to be successful? But they've really been laser focused on exploring the reasons why African American and Latino students are not successful in college classes, and trying to meet their specific needs. So exploring the issues about student-faculty interactions and you know, the psychosocial factors, kind of like the things like imposter syndrome and unwillingness to seek help and why that is. And so they're, you know, with our help in institutional research, the full-time faculty in the department are exploring the literature about what we already know about these populations and how can we best serve them. Not just, oh, this program seems to work for all students, let's try to just replicate it. It's more focused on the neediest of our students.
That's such an excellent example of just how iterative this work is, and I think you're really driving home that, you know, you start with one question or at one level, and then as you can kind of continue through the process, you know, you're able to evolve into much more kind of clear inquiry and more focused and pointed research with the data. It's really a great example. I'm kind of curious about, at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about kind of the obstacles that you might have encountered in doing the data coaching work, where you might have folks who are bewildered at best by the data, maybe even denying what it's saying as one obstacle to creating a culture of inquiry. Are there other obstacles that you've encountered as you've been rolling this approach out on your campus?
I think that it really is, well, rather than an obstacle, I guess I see it as a strength of many of the data coaches, or inquiry itself, is to be brave. And so bravery in the sense that you are asking your colleagues who, you know, we essentially live with them, right, for 25 years, to look where perhaps they haven't wanted to look before. And it's difficult, right? We do this work out of a great passion for students. And so when we see data in which we're not happy with, to say, okay, let's really look at that data, let's ask these questions. So for instance, when we're looking at guided pathways, as a community college, we know that our students are majority part-time students. And so in some departments, though, a part-time rate is higher than it is at the institutional level. And so as you're doing these guided pathways and mapping this out, you need to have that at the forefront. It can't come at the back end, because now you've created a map for a full-time student that is not the majority of your students. So for this, I think it takes bravery to be able to tell your colleagues, we really need to examine the way that we're doing this. So I think that's a large obstacle in higher ed, is that inquiry-based decision-making.
And I'd like to add, I think another obstacle is that the data coaches, getting them to see themselves as data coaches, and they're very reliant on institutional research. I think that might be part of like maybe my personality, you know, and so I think they just, it's real, a year is not a long enough time, I think, for data coaches to be 100% confident and being able to compile the data and then also analyze it and interpret it. They're very afraid of making a mistake. And like Edna said, it is very difficult to bring data into a department, especially one that's not your own, and kind of point out, hey, like here are the gaps. So that's, I think I see that they're getting better and better each time that they interact with us and have, you know, additional training. But that's I think an ongoing challenge that we're going to have is to how do you build agency in the faculty. And another challenge I'll bring up, and just being real about it, is that because this is a true collaborative across multiple areas, it does make the logistics of planning very challenging, because it doesn't live in one department where kind of like one person makes a decision. It does take much longer time to consult with each other on a lot of the decisions. And it's kind of, you know, not in our job descriptions. We decided to take this out on our own, and so, you know, it's a very small percentage of what we do, but it's a very important program to us, and so that's why we keep it going. But I feel like we're already very stretched thin, so adding this kind of to our workload has been challenging. Yeah. Oh, I think you guys are muted.
And it makes me, it's kind of, I think, raising some of the questions just about how are you applying data coaching now, you know, in the context of guided pathways planning and implementation, and kind of, as you mentioned, shifting it to focus more on supporting things like program mapping. Ideally, moving forward, how do you envision data coaching or building data literacy fitting with your guided pathways work, recognizing some of the limitations that I think many campuses are struggling with in terms of just capacity and time and basic investments in guided pathways across the institution?
Well, I think going towards what Hannah was saying, right, we all wear multiple hats on this campus, as is the reality of community college work. So Laura is a department chair, and in that, obviously, she has a lot of ability to implement the ideas behind data coaching and equity directly into her department, and she's already kind of done that before even this work began at the state level. But because she is a department chair, she's able to speak from a very knowledgeable perspective to the other department chairs. And then Hannah and myself often sit on committees, so part of the work that I do the rest of the day is to do equity within guided pathways. So Hannah and I both sit on the equity steering committee for the college, which what we've learned is that in order to, well, obviously we're still working through it, but guided pathways is many times you have to do it from inquiry-based standpoint. You have to do it with equity at the forefront of development of guided pathways. So you cannot go with inquiry, you can't miss data within there, right? Because you need to understand who the students are from the perspective of the department, not this overarching Santa Monica wide, but who is going into business, who is going into early childhood education, because that's how you develop an equity-minded guided pathways map. Now, data in and of itself is not going to solve your equity gap issues, but it's an understanding that you need to have as well. This is very slow, thoughtful, considerate work that has to happen in order for equity to be the driving force behind guided pathways successfully, I guess, if that helps to understand it. I think you're muted again.
That is, if you're going to give advice to another college that was interested in jumpstarting its data coaching work, and one of the reasons we invited Santa Monica today to talk about your work is we think that this model can be replicated in multiple size institutions and different kinds of campus environments, but we were just wondering if as you think about, you know, what would you tell yourselves if you were starting over again, or if you were giving advice to your peers as they're thinking about launching their own data coaching work?
That's a great question. I think that you have to have a lot of, well, so I think I'm like, this is Edna, I'm lucky in who I'm working with in this development of the data coaches. It wasn't my idea by any point, but it's always been a very safe group to discuss how we're going to roll this out. If somebody disagrees with a point, it's not a personal attack, right? It's what is better ultimately to develop the confidence in the data coaches or to develop the confidence of the entire campus with data coaches. So really the people who I get to sit next to during these meetings make it lovely to do this sort of work. So I think it has a lot to do with that. We have a wonderful person also who's not with us in this webinar, which is Ruth Casillas. And Ruth is great because she does a lot of logistical work as well to make this operation actually happen. And so I think it's the respect that we all have for each other that has made it successful.
My advice, this is Hannah, is, you know, it doesn't really matter what size college you are or where your campus's culture is in terms of the data journey and, you know, knowledge of the data and how to use it. I think it's any place is a good starting place. For us, I mean, if you ask some of our senior administration, many of them will not even know what data coaching is. I think for us, it didn't matter that it needed to come from top down. Like we just kind of started from the ground. It was kind of like a grassroots effort, and we were lucky and fortunate enough to have a dean who said, here's some money behind this. So I think, you know, my advice to the colleges in the Central Valley, maybe you're thinking, you know, my college is not as big as yours, or, you know, maybe I don't have a IR office as established or as big enough, you know, as big as Santa Monica's, that it doesn't really matter. You know, last year we started small. We started with training seven faculty as data coaches, and it, you know, that's not a big program, but I feel like it might be perceptible to anyone else but me, but I feel like this year, as a result of the work of just 7 data coaches last year, is that we have a lot more sophisticated, like robust discussions around data this year. You know, and I get really excited sitting in a meeting and hearing data coaches kind of reframe data. Usually I feel like a lot of the natural inclination for people when they look at data is to kind of use that single data point to confirm what they already know. And this year I feel like the same data coaches that were trained last year, when I'm talking to them about data, they're using data to expand their knowledge and ask really good follow-up questions. So I think even if your program is small, you can really use data coaching to shift your climate and culture around data. And obviously, I mean, you know, for this, your question about guided pathways is, you know, the pathways work is asking us to fundamentally change the way we're doing things. And that is so hard. And I think data is a really good tool to get us to self-reflect and say, like, how can we do things differently? So I think even if it's a small program, this year we doubled in size, so we're fortunate. But even last year when we had a small program, I still see the impact of that program this year as I'm doing my work.
Hi, this is Lara Mams. The only contribution I have to this conversation at this point is with guided pathway, a soft start with data, I think is really positive. And what I mean by that is, let's say, figure out what are the jobs that chemistry people go to. Figure out what the salary is. Those are nice little conversations to get them started. And then we can then look at maybe what are the soft skills that are required. And then ease into the gaps. Because I think sometimes people get so nervous when we go to, oh, gap, because it seems negative instead of an opportunity. So I do find when we start with just the careers, then people get excited. And sometimes they'll say, oh, now I want to know who our students are. And now you have the door that they're asking to be open.
You're muted again. Okay.
I think that's a great place for us to now ease into some of the questions that are coming up from participants. I think we're just going to have enough time for a few.
Yes.
So I'm going to pass the mic to Luis.
Thank you, Kelly.
Who's going to help facilitate the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll try to make this quick and easy for everybody. So if you go to your Zoom, down at the bottom, there's a little chat icon. That's where you want to put in additional questions. We have a few to go with, but please put your questions in the chat box. That way we can try to answer them as much as possible. We already have a few to start with. And if you do run into issue or question, technology issue, please direct your questions to Christina or to Josh, who I believe you also have on the chat. So we're gonna go with the first question. I think Dr. Lara-Brady will help us choose the first question to go with.
The first question is for Kelly, who we have here in the house. Kelly, somebody asked if you have a copy of the literature bibliography that you used to inform your presentation, if you don't mind sharing that. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the resources at the end of the webinar. I can answer that question better then. Thank you. Sure.
Okay, so the next question that we have, let me make sure I got my glasses on. Okay, does program review training for program review document writers use data coach, or does the program review coordinator serve as the data coach for the writing teams? And this is a question for the SMC team.
I can answer that. No, so our program review committee is a joint Senate committee. So we actually don't have like a official like program review coordinator or anything like that. So the program review coordinator is not a data coach. We actually have the data coaches just work with department chairs directly who are going through program review to request support if they need it. Did that answer the question? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have one more question, and then we also want to open up the phone lines if anybody has a question that they want to ask. But first, we have one question that talks about the training for the data coaches. They were talking about regarding how much time does it take. Wouldn't the amount of time of training depend on how knowledgeable the coaches are before being coached? Does that make sense? Yeah, that's for the SMC. Or do you have the same amount of time for training for all the coaches?
There's a baseline. Everyone is committed that in order to receive a stipend, they have to receive minimum 9 hours of training during a 2-day institute. And that's when we introduce very specific data tools and opportunities for faculty to practice data conversations around data that they pull from those tools. So the tools are the Launch Board, Data Mart, Chancellor's Office Data Mart, SMC Tableau, Core Perkins Indicator, and Salary Surfer. And labor market, supply and demand through the Centers of Excellence website. So everyone receives a minimum of 9 hours, but we have these opportunity for additional hands-on training on Fridays, where they can practice, and we design specific exercises and activities for them to be able to pull down the data. So it doesn't matter what their prerequisite knowledge of these tools are. Everyone has to do a minimum of 9 hours of training.
And again, it goes back to they have to be willing to be curious on their own to kind of poke around and see. And that's where once they have the training, they may go, oh, I really like Data Mart, or I really like Tableau. So that they then become an expert on that. It's kind of self-identified. Mm-hmm. But that's their comfort zone, because that just, whatever reason, that format spoke to them, and that's okay.
Okay, thank you for that. We do want to have Josh, who's online, I believe. He has a quick suggestion or assistance to us in this process here. Josh?
Yes, thank you, Luis. For all of our participants, if you'd like to join the conversation, please feel free to unmute yourself. At the bottom left-hand corner, you'll be able to click to unmute. If you happen to be on telephone, please press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Let's carry on the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. As we are going to be ready for questions from the group, how are we going to know if there's no questions?
So we wait a couple minutes for them to hear.
What if we share the additional resources and then we'll come back to questions?
Sounds good.
Let's do that. So while you're unmuting yourself so that you can participate by phone, we are going to go to additional resources. And for that, we have our wonderful Dr. Lara-Brady to go over this material. And I believe Kelly will join her.
Yeah, so this is Kelly Carantas again from the RP group, and I wanted to just loop back to the question about the bibliography for our research. At the start of the new year, the RP group, with the support of the Chancellor's Office, will be putting out data coaching. It's called Get Started Data Coaching for Guided Pathways Inquiry and Design. So it's a quick guide for jumpstarting data coaching on your own campus. And we'll include in that guide links to the resources that we were able to connect to through the literature review, as well as some of the resources we were linked to through the colleges that we interviewed as part of our exploratory research. So stay tuned, that'll be coming, and it'll be coming out through the Vision Resource Center, likely in January 2019. In the meantime, there is a little activity that we've linked you to, and I think everyone will have access to this PowerPoint after the webinar ends. So the action planning activity actually can guide you through a series of planning questions that are designed for a cross-functional team on your campus that may be interested in jumpstarting a data coaching program. So that resource is available to you as well. And I just want to mention that in the Central Valley, the Leading from the Middle, well, actually across the state, all of the Leading from the Middle academies, which are a program of the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges, we'll have a focus on building data literacy and data coaching over the course of 2019. So I would strongly encourage colleges to apply for Leading from the Middle. So it's about building data literacy in the context of guided pathways on your campus. The application deadline has been extended to the 15th of the month, and you can go on to rpgroup.org to learn more about Leading from the Middle and its focus in this upcoming year. There's also the regional research group in the Central Valley that may be another place to go for support. We're connecting with your college or district's research, institutional researcher. And then I'm going to hand it over to Lara, who's going to tell you a bit more about other Central Valley work that will happen through the learning clusters in the coming year.
Yeah, we have upcoming learning cluster topics, but we'd love to hear what you guys think, what will be helpful. You could please fill out the evaluation survey. It really takes no more than 2 minutes, I promise. Christina's putting the link on the chat box right now. It would also be sent to you after the webinar is done, but let us know what will be helpful. If additional conversations about building data literacy will be helpful, please let us know. And then that reminds me, any of the underlying material that you see is live linked, and so you could click on it directly. And once you get the copies of these materials, you could also feel free to dive into any of these additional resources, as well as for our names. that goes directly to our email addresses and additional materials from each of the colleges that we highlight today. So don't forget to use that. Lastly, the last additional resource that I want to highlight is the Vision Resource Center, which is a portal for additional tools supporting the implementation of guided pathways. We have rolled out Vision Resource Center, so anybody is welcome to log in anytime. It's free. This replaces the PLN, the Professional Learning Network. We want to highlight the use of hashtags to identify keyword or topic of interest and facilitate a search for it. So just remember when using hashtags, please make sure that you don't use spaces. The system doesn't allow for that. And then if you want to log into the Vision Resource Center through that on the right-hand side, which is join the conversation, you could look for hashtag Central Valley, hashtag Meta Major, hashtag, any of the keywords that we have been focusing on to make it easier for you to search for additional resources and support. If you don't have, let me see, what else? Thank you so much for your participation. We wanted to get just a quick pulse of how this learning cluster helped you and what additional topics might be helpful for you. We want to give you thanks for supporting. Thanks to MSC for sharing, SMC, I'm sorry, Santa Monica College, for sharing their data literacy, data coaching method. And we specifically chose to highlight their work because it's very easily replicable at colleges of different sizes, like Kelly mentioned, and SMC also as well. But we wanted to take just a couple minutes to get your ideas as to how this supported your work. So if you could please go to menti.com and use the code 28276. Let us know if there are any topics of interest that could be helpful for you for future Guided Pathways webinar. I'm hoping that people can share what might be helpful for them. Previously, as I mentioned, we shared the journey of Reed and Madera College in building up some of the pieces prior to meta majors. And then we also talked to Modesto College and their amazing student services folks team in integrating student services and also just redesigning it, which was an amazing conversation. And this is our third one that talks about data literacy, data coaching. So if you could please go to menti.com and use the code 28276. Oh, we're getting some responses. Somebody was brave enough to do it.
Some of the topics that we've also talked about are the possibility of diving in more to how to use student voices in your guided pathways inquiry and design, as well as looking, just as one of the participants suggested, looking at areas of inquiry or shared metrics and data points that you can use to support different aspects of guided pathways development. The RFP group will also be working with the Chancellor's Office to put out a guide on using shared metrics for guided pathways inquiry and design in the new year as well. And there is a new learning module in the Vision Resource Center that's dedicated to collecting student voices for guided pathways inquiry and design as well. So when you get to the guided pathways landing page in the Vision Resource Center, that resource is linked at the bottom of the page.
We have a new addition. Someone posted working towards the unified GP campus vision and another including district and GP planning, which is great. Please keep those coming. We're gonna just wait for a minute or so, and then we'll go on to a more anonymous collection of your feedback. So this is the only question that we're gonna post, so you will not see the anonymous feedback, because we do want it to be free of any other bias by it being posted. I do want to say in closing, as you're giving your feedback here, that what's happening to our community college system, the disruption because of technology, in some ways I kind of see the importance and the ubiquitous nature of so much data, like grains of sand. You know, there's so much you can shape out of sand, and it's really both an art and it's also a science. And we need everybody, regardless of your position, and regardless of your feelings about data. I have to, my hats off to the SMC team, Santa Monica team, because they really are just going deep into this work and not being afraid of what roles or titles they've had or people have, and are just going all in, because the important thing here is to know why something works or why something doesn't work. And only in having this dialogue through data sharing and understanding the data will we be able to support each other and to really meet the challenge of this guided pathways implementation over the next few years. So just encourage everybody to dig deep. And thank you for the great suggestions.
Thank you so much, Luis and Kelly. We see more responses coming in slowly. Oh, 10. We have 10 brave humans that have pulled out their cell phones and gone to menti.com and used code 28276. I feel like an influencer.
Yeah. So we're doing a fundraiser.
An idea raiser.
An idea raiser.
Double your funding in the next 2 minutes. We're going to get all this data, so feel free to just, whatever your thoughts of, specifically if you're with other people watching this webinar, any topics of interest for future Guided Pathways webinar, let us know what you guys are thinking. We're also going to be sending a SurveyMonkey link after this so that we could get a little bit more of your responses of how helpful this was, if this was a good vehicle to talk about some of the specific topics for the Valley, as well as what you think for next ones might be interesting. But we thank you so much for your time. We have one more question. Two more for this Menti one. As a result of this learning cluster, how strongly agree or disagree about the information that you receive and the new knowledge that you gain applicable to your work? This is not going to show responses individually. It's just going to show an overall score. So again, if you could go to menti.com and use the code 28276 and let us know, how is the information you received? Was it what you expected? Was it not? Did you gain any new knowledge applicable to your work? Specifically, if you're a researcher on campus, a director of IR, any student services folks, any admin, faculty, staff, please let us know, classify. You can still respond to these questions even after we end the webinar. Because the last one that we have is share how we could improve, and that's just an open-ended question. So you could write your thoughts, whatever you have in mind.
More jokes.
Sure. But yeah, please let us know.
Okay, I think we are wrapping up now. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our special partner here that shared the RP group's work on data coaching and so forth. Thank you, Kelly, so much for that, and for the SMC team that prepared and did rehearsals with us. Thank you so much for your work and in doing this session with us and for us statewide. Actually, it went beyond Central Valley. So hats off to Central Valley. Hello to everyone. Thank you, everyone who joined us outside of the Central Valley as well. And special thanks to Dr. Lara-Brady for spearheading this work with us. And we really enjoyed it. So on behalf of CLP, thank you for all the great partnership.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is the last learning cluster of 2018. We're hoping to join you again in late January, early February sometime. We're thinking, I don't know if it's helpful to keep these conversations on a monthly basis, or if you think 3 to 4 learning clusters next year will be better. Let us know, but we hope to talk to you again the end of January, early February. But thank you again for joining.
Happy holidays.